Ratings released late this afternoon show a nearly 70% ratings plummet for the 8 p.m. slot once held by Tucker Carlson at Fox News. It took only 5 days to drop nearly 70% at 8 p.m. Another ratings collapse as bad as 2020 after Fox called Arizona insanely early, and the network continues to work to destroy the host that carried them for years. Today, Media Matters, a vile watchdog group that exclusively attacks conservative media, released a video showing Tucker Carlson ragging on Fox Nation. That's Fox's subscription service that's been bleeding subscribers since Tucker was fired. Now, this video is from nearly a year ago. It shows Tucker complaining about the vast work that his team was doing for the platform, which he said was otherwise quite weak. Take a look.
But nobody's going to watch it on Fox Nation. Nobody watches Fox Nation because the site sucks. So I'd really like to just dump the whole thing on YouTube. But anyway, that's just my view. I'm just frustrated with it's hard to use that site. I don't know why they're not fixing it. It's driving me insane. And they're like making like Lifetime movies, but they don't work on the infrastructure of the site. Like what? It's crazy. And it drives me crazy because it's like we're doing all this extra work and no one can find it. It's unbelievable, actually.
So it's pretty clear what's happening here. The head of public relations, the woman on the right, a woman Tucker and other primetime hosts despised, is continuing her mission to destroy the most effective name in conservative news by teaming up with a watchdog group that wants nothing more than to destroy both Tucker Carlson and Fox, the two uniting over a common enemy, as we so often see. Fox showing there's no level that they won't stoop to in their desperate attempt to prove to the audience that Tucker is deplorable and this bizarre shotgun firing was justified. Former Fox anchor Megyn Kelly explained it like this just a couple hours ago on her podcast.
This is all an orchestrated hit job, in my opinion, and it's not a subtle one. It's not enough to fire you, Haya. You must be destroyed, and it doesn't matter how nice a guy you were, how many points you put on the board for the channel, that you brought us through the Trump years, that you were #1 in your time slot, that you haven't said one negative word about us. You will be destroyed to settle some angry, bitter, internal PR hacks, personal vendetta against you. And if she managed to convince the bosses, the Murdochs, that he's not good for them either, that he may have called them a name or two, so much the better, because they're the ones who make the final decisions. That's what I think is going on here.
That sounds just about right. The Fox brand is getting hammered, and it's becoming clear that while Tucker wasn't bigger than Fox, he was way too big for a stunt like this. Fox clearly working toward mainstream appeal. Here's CEO Suzanne Scott and a couple of reporters hanging out with Mark Milley at the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend, the swampiest event of the year. This is the branding that Fox News wants now. Intoxicated by the wealth the company has accumulated and the proximity to power, much less interested in holding it to account. This is what's happened to all the media in this country over time. Fox is beginning that slide that you've seen out of so much of the American media as they cozy up to power. And all of a sudden it gets really, really hard to hold power to account when you're sitting at dinner parties with Mark Milley and everybody else. And that's what the swamp is. They all become very cohesive. They all become friends. It becomes really, really hard to hold them accountable. And then somebody like Tony Fauci does what he did through COVID, and you don't really want to hold him to account. That's what most of the American media did. And so many other stories, you can count them all day long. This weekend, at that same event, the president cheered on Fox's decision. Take a look at this.
Well, the truth is, we really have a record to be proud of. Vaccinated the nation, transformed the economy, earned historic legislative victories and midterm results, but the job isn't finished. I mean, it is finished for Tucker Carlson.
Kind of like a dictator mocking the imprisonment of his loudest dissenter. What a huge win this has been for the D.C. establishment. Massive win. Before Tucker's firing, Fox's mainstream push was even more evident. For months, the network had ignored Donald Trump, just acted like he wasn't there, awkwardly, as his poll numbers skyrocketed. Fox not even acknowledging the frontrunner for the most part until more recently when, well, look who it is, giving the former president the entire hour on his show just a couple weeks ago. Without Tucker, you may struggle to see much of Donald Trump on Fox, even though just today, CNN announced that they're giving the former president an hour-long town hall next week. That's right. Trump is going to be campaigning on CNN for an hour in prime time. But you probably won't see him on Fox. One of the best conservative minds in the country and a frequent guest on this show, Victor Davis Hanson from the Hoover Institute, put it all in perspective in a recent podcast. Take a listen.
They needed Tucker Carlson to appeal to the new Republican Party. And so what do I mean by that? He was talking about the absurdity of woke. And I don't know where you find somebody like that who has the ability to articulate those positions but is not crazy. Especially, Tucker came from one of the wealthiest families in California. He was an aristocrat.
All right, John Solomon knows this business better than most. He's the editor-in-chief of Just the News. John, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to be with you.
You're watching Fox launch quite an assault on Mr. Carlson, clearly very panicked after making this, I think, very impulsive decision. You're seeing how they're reacting now.
Well, listen, their numbers are the biggest reaction, right? They've lost enormous audience in a week's time. I haven't seen a cliff like that in any media storyline in the last decade. So there's been a consequence because the audience was not in favor of this decision, and they don't feel like the audience doesn't feel like Fox has explained why it took this action, why it took one of its favorite hosts off the air. And until they do, I think there's going to be a growing dissension between audience and original programmer. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon.
You make such a good point, because what we're getting is we're getting these little leaks of possible excuses. How many possible excuses have you heard for this over the last week? I mean, it's been like 10 or 20, and they're everywhere. And you can tell that they're just trying to cloud the water, muddy the waters up, so that nobody really knows what happened. But people need an answer for something like this, because he was, I think, the most effective conservative voice.
Yeah, listen, he was a #1 show. There's a reason people liked him, and so he brought something to the table, and he brought a younger demographic to the table, too. Cable news is a tricky audience, right? It's getting older, and so when you can bring younger demographics in, that's a second power that Tucker Carlson brought, and I think, it'll take some time. Fox has been through adjustments like this, but I think the most important thing they haven't done is give a clear explanation to its audience why they did this action.
That's exactly right. Now, do you think that the Murdochs bent to increasing left-wing pressure as Fox has gotten more powerful and conservative media has, in my opinion, rescued Americans from solely consuming information from liberal outlets like we did for decades? I think the left has created ways to bully and censor conservative media. Censorship giants like NewsGuard, the Global Disinformation Index, which we talk about a lot on this show, are working to silence dissent, focusing only on misinformation and offensive content from the right. Speaker McCarthy had a big announcement that they're going to investigate the taxpayer funds given to these groups. Do you think that that's a big part of why Fox finally bent?
I don't think we know enough about the Fox decision. I think that may be part of the problem. We don't know the real reason for why they took this action. Who was involved? Who lobbied? Who put pressure? Is there something we don't know about? A lot of times in these storylines with employee and employers, there's stories we don't know right away. And so it's hard to make an informed decision on that. People will speculate. I don't know. I do think the censorship machinery that we've helped expose at Just the News, at the Foundation for Freedom Online helped expose, the Global Disinformation Index, NewsGuard, the FBI office in San Francisco that passed on censorship requests to big tech. Those are some of the most troubling things I've witnessed in my 35 years as a professional journalist. Our founding fathers could not imagine America where government thought it was their role to censor or to suggest censorship to private industry. And I think that may be the most perilous thing that we don't have good answers on right now.
Right. It's such a crafty and clever way to suppress speech by saying that it's offensive or that it's cruel, and nobody has a good answer to that. You know, very few people have a good answer to that. Elon Musk has a good answer to that, but in the mainstream, there's not many that do. They just say we have to be able to speak, and if that angers you, you're going to have to deal with it. John Solomon, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.